What's up everyone? Welcome to another episode. Today we're building up the Seka Spear RDC. Let's go. So this is the Seka Spear in the RDC edition, meaning that it is the lighter version out of the regular Spear line. And yeah, I mean, it came in this beautiful paint job, the Kronos paint job. I've been unboxing this frame a couple days ago, so if you haven't seen that video and you want to see how much of a pleasure the unboxing experience of this frame was, I'm just going to link the video somewhere up here. The set comes with the frame itself, of course, with the fork, with this nice, beautiful, super thin seat post. You actually have multiple options when it comes to the seat post if you want a setback or no setback. Of course, you also have variable options when it comes to picking your handlebar stem length as well as the width of the handlebars. It also comes with some very nice bottle cages which are aerodynamically integrating, but we're gonna get to all those components throughout the build. So I would say that's enough talking. Let's start with mounting the brakes to the fork so that we can start getting this front end set up properly, and then we move throughout the frame and install the rest of the components. The plan is today to build this up and finish this build because it is Saturday and I want to ride this tomorrow. So let's see, challenge accepted, I'd say. Let's go. So I'm going to be building this up with an Ultegra Di2 nice new 12-speed group set. So now I would say let's route the front brake through the fork. Let's push the brake hose through this little opening down here, and let's hope that it's easily gonna pop up here. So let's go. This is looking good. There we go. That was easy. And this is nothing that is standard. I mean, I've built a bunch of other bikes, which you might have seen in some of my other bike build videos, where actually this isn't a proper channel that goes from one opening to the other, but it's rather just a hole up here, and you kind of have to fish out the brake hose through here, which is not always great fun, but this is why I'm very happy that this worked out so smoothly. So let me get the bolts and then we're gonna mount the brakes to the fork. So also what really speaks in favor of this frame set and the quality of it is this nice surface here. So I think also something that you can look out for whenever you're buying a new frame, because this one is super flat and faced, no paint overspray, which means that mounting and centering your brakes is gonna be nice and straightforward later down the line, because the brake is really gonna be setting properly flat on in the fork. All right. We don't need to torque it all the way up because we'll have to center it later anyways. So this other bolt, as you see, it has this little ratchet on it. So this one needs to go into this little hole on the brake caliper mount. All right, as I said, this one's totally fine if it's all a little bit loose, because we need this caliper to be loose and movable left and right when we're going to be centering the brakes. So I'd say this is good enough for now. By the way, also, the frame comes with a nice manual, and the manual actually tells me that they recommend to put a little bit of electrical tape here to secure the brake hose, which I guess is going to help with avoiding rattling up in the headset. So something that I've never done before, but I think I'm going to be doing moving forward on all other bikes, because it absolutely makes sense. And while talking about the manual, this is also something that you don't really see that much these days, and I particularly appreciate one page in this manual, which is this one, because it has all the torque settings or all the torque specs for all the bolts that we're gonna need and that we're gonna be tightening throughout this build. Yeah, with the proper torque value, which is super helpful. Everything is in one place. You don't need to like look and search for the manual or through the manual or online in some Reddit forums and so on and so forth. It's all right here. So yeah, big thumbs up to Seka for that. Now we can continue. But before we actually put the fork in, let's quickly mount the rear brake hose, because that's going to make it a little bit easier when it comes to routing the hose all the way through the frame up into the headset. So let's go. Very similar story with the rear brake hose. We're pretty much just going to be pushing the hose through another hole and then guiding it up towards the headset. Here in the brakes, normally, at least on the Shimano ones, you have this little pin here in the front, this one, that you might want to remove. I'll tell you why later. And yeah, let's make sure that you put this one in a safe space where you are not going to lose it. So now we take the rear brake hose, we push it through this opening in the frame, and we guide it through. Let me zoom you out a little bit. So now we guide the brake hose through here. I can already see it. There we go. All right. This is looking good. And then what's happening when you're routing a stiff hose like this through a frame, you get a bunch of rattling. And the nice thing is that this Seka frame actually also comes with this foamy outer sleeve, which is going to be reducing exactly that noise. So we're going to put this on top of the brake hose and push it in position so that it's sitting nicely in the down tube. There we go. Way better. So now here in the front, it is going to be essential to grease those areas where the bearings are going to be sitting in, which of course come with the frame set, to grease this area nicely up to hold any water that might want to come into the frame, to hold this back as well as possible. So let's get the grease out and yeah, let's protect these areas. And don't worry too much if you are messing up and making everything greasy around this beautiful paint job, because we're going to be cleaning everything up afterwards anyways, and always better to have a little bit too much grease than too little. Let's also of course grease up the bearings a little bit, and let's set this one in from the bottom. Should be a nice interference fit. That's looking good. Second bearing, top bearing, also grease it up nicely, and now loop it over the rear brake hose and put it in place here. Nice. Now we can get the fork in. All right, we got the fork. So now here we got to navigate the brake hose through the head tube as well. All right. And here it is now going to be important which way we're going to be aligning those brake hoses. So I'm in Europe, so I'm going to have the left hand to be braking in the front and the right hand to be braking on the rear. So I just want to make sure that already now those hoses are routed accordingly. So this one is the front, this one is the rear. And then this frame also comes with this part. I'll call it the fork centralizer. I'm sure it has a proper name. And it has these little openings here, which are there to actually guide the brake hoses, so the left and the right one, and keep them in place. So let's do that. Let's make sure that the correct brake hoses are on the right and correct spots. Okay, so that is looking good. Of course, we can't leave the headset and the front area like this, so it also comes with a nice and stylish headset cover. This one also has these two openings. So now we got to route our brake hoses through these and then put it on top, and then it's gonna look pretty good in the front. So let me do that real quick. All right. Okay. So yeah, that was pretty straightforward, I would say. One of the easier installs so far. Now all of this is kind of being held in place just by this pressurizing ring, the fork centralizer, if you might remember. But to keep things safe, I'm actually going to add a little bit of electrical tape around the fork and the frame to hold these things together, because in theory everything could slip out of here when I'm going to be moving the frame around. So better safe than sorry. Let's install a little bit of electrical tape and then we continue. So now we can come back here to the rear brake and attach the bolts that come with the group set. So I'm gonna take this one. There are gonna be two different bolts that you see, one with a little nupsie in the front, one without. So let's use the one with it first. So this one goes towards the rear in this opening where we removed this little protection bolt. And you might already know what this bolt is going to be for, because it's going to be inserted in there and yeah, kind of holding the bolt in place in this little noopsy area at the top, just in case things are getting loose along the way, which shouldn't be happening because I think there is some Loctite on those bolts already coming from the factory, but still, better safe than sorry. And now again, we don't necessarily need to tighten this all the way because we'll have to center it to the disc brakes anyways. So once this is in here, we can now take this little protection bolt that we have and insert it back into its opening. All right, rear brake done. All right, so let's move forward to the handlebars, and these beautiful handlebars also come with already some nice pre-routed wires or cable outers, which are supposed to help you route your brake hose through the system. But as I've done in my previous builds, I'm trying to do this my way with a nice magnetic cable routing kit. Burned myself in the past as well doing this or trying this, but I think this is supposed to be a high quality handlebar which should be quite smooth on the inside, so I think or hope that it is actually going to be quite straightforward with a tool like this. So let's go. So easiest to do this on the floor, so for this we're taking this magnetic routing kit and guiding the cable through here. There we go. Guiding it towards the opening. And here we should have it. There we go. So now we'll be able to attach the brake hose here by screwing this end into the brake hose and then just pull it through into place. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the end of the brake hose and then take this adapter and screw this one in here. This is now gonna allow us to pull the brake hose through the handlebar, hopefully. It's already here. It's already at the exit point. Just gotta push it through. That is looking good. All right, let me get the cable out. Now let's do the front brake. Now again, I'm taking the routing kit, inserting it down here, and then trying to route it through the exit again. There we go. There we go. We got it. So now let's just push it all the way through. So now we're ready to assemble the front end. So now let's take the handlebars and push them onto the fork. Let's make sure that also the pins nicely lock in, the pins from the headset cover nicely lock in. Then we'll take the expander plug, which also comes with the frame set. We drop it in here and we expand it if we have the right tool. All right, so now we'll expand the expander plug in here. Maximum 10 Newton meters. Okay. So now let's put everything back nicely in place. Let's take the top cover. And this is now going to help us to compress this whole system down, take all the play out. We don't necessarily need to tighten it all the way because we'll later have to straighten the handlebars anyways once the wheels are in. Okay. That should be good for now. Looks like a very nice front end, I would say. All right, next up, to finish the front part of the bike, we're going to be adding the shifters. So let's start with the left-hand one. let's get this slotted on here. And here, I don't know if you can see this, but we have this nice kind of rough texture, which gives us a good indication for where we want to place the hoods. So now I'm going to just mount it that the top of the shifter is flush with that texture. And I'm just roughly going to tighten it up, not to final spec yet, because we might still want to move it around a bit. Now the other one. Get this one in place, also align it with the upper edge of that texture and tighten it up. All right, so now it's time to attach the hoses to the brakes. So let's get the cutter tools out. So just in case if you don't know how this whole system works, so we're now going to be cutting the brake hoses to length, that they fit perfectly into the shifters. And then at the end of the hose, we're actually going to be plugging in this kind of metal pin. And then there is going to be something called an olive going around the hose as well. And that all together is then going to be compressed with this bolt, I would say, or this nut in the end. And it is actually going to be crushing this olive within the shifter, expanding it to a way or to a degree where it creates an airtight seal so that no oil, no braking fluid can escape the whole system. So let's do this. So to cut these hoses, there are multiple tools out there. This one is from a company called Jaguar. You see that there's this nice little small guillotine coming out of here, giving you a nice and clean and flat cut. But I think there are multiple brands out there that offer something similar. So let's try what I like to do with these kind of systems to take a little bit of pressure off when it comes to trying to find the perfect length is I like to push a little bit of the brake hose back into the handlebar actually. So just in case I cut it a tiny bit too short, I'll have a little bit of buffer here. So let me push a little bit of hose back and then let's see, I think I want the hose to be cut here. A little bit of force. Okay. So it is important that we have a nice round opening here. So what I like to do is I like to use a little corkscrew just to open this up a little bit and make it nice and round. Perfect. And now we'll take this little pin. We push this in by hand as far as we can. Like that. And then, of course, there's another tool because the bike industry needs to make money. This one is also from a company called Jaguar. So I'm going to be clamping the brake hose in here, and then you'll see this little pin is actually going to push the pin back into the hose. So now you see that with every turn, I'm pushing that pin a little bit further into the hose. There we go. That is good enough. And that part is done. So now we take that brake hose, we put that nut on the back, then we add that little olive on top of here. And then we need to make sure that we push the brake hose all the way into the shifter. And try to thread this in with your fingers as far as you can. Then you should feel some resistance at some point, which is the moment where this nut is making contact with the olive, and now when you start tightening it, you're basically starting to crush that olive. This is also a metal to plastic interface, so make sure to not over tighten this. I've done this already twice, that I over tightened this one and then I had a crack in the shifter, which meant you had to replace the shifter, and that happened on a Dura-Ace one, so it was no fun. So. Alright, I think that should be good enough. Okay, let's do exactly the same thing on the other shifter. Now we get the nut and the olive on top and we work it into the shifter. As I said, it's nice if you can move the shifter around a bit. So let's put this in here, make sure that it's pushed all the way in. And now let's screw in that nut as far as you can by hand. And let's torque this up. 5 to 6 Newton meters normally. I don't really have an adapter for this to measure it, so I do like 3/4 turns And that should be good enough. All right, so let me tighten that bolt real quick, that it stays nice in place. Okay, now it's time to install the rest of the Di2 system, so particularly the derailleurs, and then when it comes to placing the battery, this seat post is a little bit too narrow to actually fit a battery in there, but Seka came up with, I think, quite a smart solution for this, so I'm quite excited to test that out, but more on that in a second. First of all, let's get front and rear derailleur mounted. Let's go. So, rear derailleur, pretty straightforward. As with every thread, we add a bit of grease in here. There's also this little nose on here, so you want to make sure that this is sitting on top of this little nose. Just like that. Let's tighten it up. Alright, rear derailleur, done. Alright, so now let's also push the Di2 cable through the chain stays down into the bottom bracket area. And let's add the end cap here. Of course, the frame also comes with various end caps to close the holes on the frame, depending if you're using a SRAM system or if you're using a Di2 system or a complete mechanical system. So this is now from the pack of the Di2 setup, of course. Let me plug in that cable here and let's add that little rubber part here and close off the frame that there's no water coming in. Nice. Now it's done. And now, as you can see here, there is no front derailleur hanger, and this is because Seka came up with a smart solution on where to place the Di2 battery. And you have to mount it to this little bracket here, which then goes into the frame set, locks in here, and you attach it pretty much with the front derailleur cage sitting up here. So now I'm quickly just going to run through the Di2 cable for the front derailleur, and then we're going to place the battery. Let's push the Di2 cable through for the front derailleur, and then, like in the rear, we take one of those rubber covers and close up that hole. It will also help us to keep the cable in place. Alright. And what I've not shown you so far is that you see that there is an opening here at the very bottom of the frame. So this is where the Di2 battery is going to be inserted back into the frame up to the position on where the front derailleur mount is going to be. But before that, we got to attach the Di2 battery to this little adapter. So for that, the frame comes with some zip ties. So let's use these first up here at the top. There we go. And one at the bottom. Alright, let's cut these ends off. And just to be safe, I'll also wrap a little bit of electrical tape around it, just like that, just to make sure that it doesn't move around in that bracket at all. Okay, so now we can insert it. So first of all, of course, let's attach the Di2 cables to the battery and push them into the frame as far as we can. Now we take, what is that, size 5 key, and we push this one in, and we now try to align it with the holes up here. Alright, so now we're going to put the bracket on top. It's going to push this front derailleur wire off to the side, but there is a little funnel here, you see a little gap, so it's not going to get squashed too much. And now we take the bolts that come with it, which are also nice super light titanium bolts, and attach the battery as well as the front derailleur mount at the same time. There we go. Nice. Let's get the front derailleur on. And now, of course, we're not just going to be riding around with the frame that has a big hole in the bottom. There is, of course, a nice thick rubber cover to close that gap here. So we're going to push that one in. There we go. And now have a nice clean bottom bracket area. So now let's do the promised front derailleur. Let's just roughly attach it because we'll have to adjust it anyways to the corresponding height once we have the crankset in. So just move it up almost all the way, and I'll connect the Di2 cable in here, and it's nice and clean. So now you might see there's another small hole here in the back, which is there in case you want to install a fully mechanical group set, but as we went Di2, we don't need this one, so we're closing it off with one of those rubber covers. Yeah, let's move forward. All right, so now before we can install the crankset, we need to install the bottom bracket, and here we have a beautiful sponsored bottom bracket from Big One. So Big One is the company who's providing the UAE team with their bottom bracket. So I think if it is good for them, it might be good enough for me. So this is one of their DC Tech bottom brackets. It is a BSA one with a nice, with nice ceramic bearings in there. So I expect a nice and smooth crank spin test after the install. So and BSA, one of my favorite standards, together with T47, pretty much anything that's threaded these days. And the nice thing about this is they have a very tight fit metal sleeve on the inside, which is very nice when it comes to tight spacings and particularly rear brake hoses that sometimes get into the way of pushing that sleeve from the top or from the bottom, especially when it is a plastic one. It makes it quite hard to install sometimes, constantly popping it out, or worst case popping it out while the bike is already fully assembled. So yeah, this is why I'm a big fan of having this metal inner sleeve. But enough talking, let's install the bottom bracket. So as you know by now, with all threads, let's grease them up nicely at first to keep water out of this bottom bracket area being particularly important. Do the same thing on the other side. All right, let's get the bottom bracket in. So here on those bottom brackets, you have a nice indicator which one goes where. So this is the right one. You also have a little arrow in which direction to tighten them. So this is going to be counterclockwise. So we got to push this one in, and then you already see this one is going in smooth as butter, which also really speaks for the quality of the threads on the Seka Spear frame. There we go. Now that's hand tight. We're going to tighten it fully in a second. I'll just attach the other cup from the other side. Same here, everything goes in quite smoothly, even though it is a little bit harder with fully greased up fingers, and also the sleeves are now intersecting already with each other, so I think I'll use the tool for the rest of this. And now looking at the outer side of this bottom bracket, it looks like this might require some special tool, but actually a regular Shimano BSA compatible tool is going to work. It basically just has less of these indents, which is mainly there for weight saving, I've been told. So to now protect the bottom bracket paint a little bit, or anodizing a little bit, I'll put a little bit of plastic wrap around it and switch to the right side. And now I tighten it to 40 Newton meters, which just means quite strong. All right, other side. Oh, it looks still like new. There we go. Done. Done. All right, so now we're installing this Ultegra crankset. Let's put some grease on here. As you see, there is already some leftover grease from the previous build, because this was installed on another bike before. All right, so this is gonna go in smoothly. All right, very smooth. Now let's quickly do the other side. So here, let's add the crank arm. There we go. Put this little compression bolt on. This is gonna press everything nicely together. There's a little tool that you can use for this. Otherwise, I've also already just stick my thumb in there and twist it this way. Only 1 to 2 Newton meters, so not too much pressure on here. And then there's this little pin that you need to push down, which is there to basically protect your crank arm from falling off in case some of those bolts get loose. I wouldn't really rely on it, but it is an extra level of protection that's nice to have. So now we got to torque up those bolts with 12 to 14 Newton meters. So let's start with this one and not go all the way and alternate. There we go, that's 12. That's also 12. So I like to set it to 12 and then overshoot just by a tiny bit. There we go. All right, so I would say it's time for a quick spin test. So nice. So now that we're here, we're going to quickly adjust the height of the front derailleur. What you want is actually this outer cage to be sitting around, I would say, 1 to maximum 2 millimeter above the top of the teeth of the big chainring. And then also you want to make sure that it is parallel to the chainring as well. Pretty much like that. Tighten it and you're good to go. So now next up, let's add the bottle cages, as I already mentioned in the unboxing video. In case you haven't seen it, check it out here. These are aerodynamically shaped, so these nicely wrap around the down tube as well as the seat tube. So let's get those titanium bolts out here. I strongly assume they are titanium because they're ridiculously light. You got 3 mounting points here. You can go either lower or a little bit higher. I prefer to go a little bit higher because it just makes it ergonomically a little bit easier for me when it comes to grabbing them. There you go. All right. All right, first bottle cage done. All right, these do look quite good. What do you think? All right, so next I would say let's get some wheels in and put the chain on. Let's go. So what wheels are we going to use for this build? As this is supposed to be a lightweight build, sorry for not going all Dura-Ace, but budget-wise that was just a bit tricky this time. And but I think still we'll be able to achieve some nice lightweight build, at least I expect this to be. And for this we're using the Brisk wheels, which are under 1 kilogram, which are set up with some Galfer rotors and the brand new cassettes from Neutron. So you might have seen Neutron on one of my or a couple of other videos from me already. They are lighter than actually the comparable Dura-Ace cassette, but the thing was with the previous generation of the Neutron cassettes is that they have been quite a bit noisier, especially once my wax was wearing off the chain. I mean, it was a good indicator that you have to re-wax again, but sometimes it already happened after around 100 kilometers. And now they sent over these new cassettes, which are supposed to have addressed this issue and be way quieter than the previous generation. So while riding this bike and while reviewing this bike, I will in parallel also be reviewing these new, these new Neutron cassettes. So let's get those wheels on. All right, so let's get this rear wheel in first. Let's get out the axle. Also, let's add a little bit of grease into the thread here for the through axle. All right, let's get the wheel in. Okay. All right, let's take out the excessive grease from here. Nice. So let's do the front. Let's get the through axle out. Also, let's put a bit of grease on the through axle. And let's slot the wheel in. All right. We'll have to center the brakes, of course, still, but that's already starting to look like a proper bike. So let's also center the brakes, because we can hear there's a little bit of rubbing. I mean, there are multiple tools. Also in some of my other videos you've seen a tool that you slot in between the brake pads, but in case you don't have a tool like this, I just quickly want to show you how to do this. So I either look through here, like in between the brake pads, and just see that I position the caliper in a position where it's really centered, or I actually, like now, just play around with the position to see where the rubbing gets less, and then slowly start tightening up those screws. It's a little bit of a trial and error. No rubbing. Nice. All right. So now we just tighten them and then we're good. Fantastic. And you can do pretty much the same thing on the rear. And if you're struggling to center the brake just by feel or by eyes, there are these tools, like this one's from Bursman. You basically just sit it on top of the disc and you slide it in between the brake pads. Now you push the front brake, or actually the rear brake in this case, and then you tighten up those bolts, because that should automatically nicely center the brake on the frame. All right, let's get it out. Let's see if it works on first try. There we go. Nice one. All right, so next up, let's fit the chain. This is a chain that's coming from my previous build, so if we're lucky, this one is gonna just fit in place without the need to be shortened. It is also hot waxed before, so it's gonna keep everything nice and clean. The method that I like to do is I'll put the chain on the small ring in the front and also the smallest sprocket in the back, and then just make sure that there is a little bit of tension on the rear derailleur cage, and most of the time that actually worked out quite well for me. Let's guide it through the jockey wheels. All right, and this could actually work. So I would say, instead of shortening it, I'll just give this a try if this is gonna work, because I think it should. So then we take our quick links. They also have a little arrow on them showing you the direction of the chain movement. So when you're pedaling, the chain on the bottom is going this way. There is a little arrow pointing to the left. So I'm gonna insert it this way here. And then on the rear side of the chain this way. And now you pull those two together, and you need a little tool for this. You can also do it with force by just stepping onto the chain while the quick link is up here, because here you can actually kind of force it to expand. But we have the tool, so we just do this and click it into place, and then good to go. Let's check the indexing real quick. Up, 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 up. I mean, I can already now say that the cassette indeed is still louder than a regular Shimano Dura-Ace cassette, but I think quieter than the previous generation of the Neutron one. Let's go down, 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 and down. And that's all on the small ring, so this would be heavily cross-chaining already, so we shouldn't be sitting there anyways. Nice, so let's see front derailleur. Shifting performance in the front. All right, right from the start. There we go, very, very nice. All right, indexing done. And just in case things are not running as smooth when it comes to the indexing as on this bike from the start, it is fairly easy. It depends a little bit on what system you're using. If you're fully mechanical, you do tweak it, of course, on the actual rear derailleur. But if you're on an electronic SRAM or an electronic Di2 system, you do everything within the app. These apps are nice and guided on how to actually do this, how to index them. And yeah, normally it takes less than 5 minutes to actually get it perform like this, potentially even quieter with an original cassette. Now let's move forward to some more finishing touches, particularly the saddle. Then for the saddle, we have this nice super light Berg saddle. So let me just try to figure out how I'm going to be installing this clamp. Let's wrap this ultra lightweight Berg saddle around, put the counterpart of the rails underneath, and then basically with this little bolt, we're defining the angle of your saddle, which now is maybe a little bit tricky because it is in a stand where it's not super even, but this is also something that we can tweak on later once we do a proper bike fit. And then you insert this rear bolt, and this one is actually the one that you tighten up to 6 Newton meters once you defined the angle with the upper bolt or with the front bolt. So now let's say this is supposed to be the angle and it's supposed to be this far back. There we go. So we take the torque wrench, we set it to 6 Newton meters. And now we torque this one up to 6 Newton meters. There we go. All right, that looks good. So now there's one more finishing touch that I'm not the biggest fan of, and is wrapping the bar tape. So let me do a quick time lapse here. Alright, so now to finish things off, we just need to align the handlebar to the tire, which is looking good right now. And then we have to tighten this upper bolt cap to 3.5 Newton meters. There we go. This is, by the way, also, of course, part of your torque setting overview in the manual. And then once we've done that, we got to tighten up the bolts here on the stem. Also, please make sure to first tighten up the top cover and then the bolts, because otherwise if you tighten the bolts first, then the top cover is only going to be pressing against this part of the stem, and it's not actually going to be compressing this whole system up in the front, and you might end up with the loose headset where everything is moving a little bit back and forth. So first tightening up top cap, now tightening up the bolts up here. And these bolts we're going to tighten with 5 Newton meters. So let's set the torque wrench to 5. All right, so let's grab the one across. There we go, bottom one. And again, the top one. Nice. All right, that's done. And with that, we're pretty much done with this build. So I'm very excited to see how this bike turned out. I'm of course very curious to see what the weight of this is going to be, knowing and just having the experience of riding metal and titanium bikes recently. I feel that this might be a different category, different league when it comes to weight, but let's see. Of course, if you're building it together yourself, I mean, there's still one major thing that needs to happen, and it is adjusting the seat post height. Then also, of course, torquing this to 7.5 Newton meters, which is nicely written even on the component up here. But this is something that I'm going to be doing tomorrow before riding out with the bike, and yeah, doing this little bike fit. One thing that I've only done off camera is to also, of course, tighten the bolts of your levers. So once you put them in place, I recommend doing this before actually wrapping the bar tape, which is something that that was the moment where I figured this out. And yeah, but I think that is enough talking. Let's put this on the scale. All right, so let's see. Let's turn on the scale, zero it, and now let's get the bike on here. And let's see. We're at 6.34 kilograms. Yeah. So as you see, we're at 6.34 kilograms, which is quite impressive. It's actually way better than I thought this would turn out. And this is taking into account that it's with those bottle cages that came with it, which are, I think, aerodynamically beautiful and perfect. And maybe aero might be winning over weight. But I've been building up the recent bikes with, I think, bottle cages which are around like 5 grams or something. So that would have been a weight saving. So seeing that this is now happening as well, also with an Ultegra group on here, so this is not even Jura Ace, which I think would shave another 200 grams, I guess, around it, off of it. So yeah, very impressive result. And I gotta say that overall, this was a very smooth build. As you have seen, I didn't encounter any issues, anything that I would have need to work or fine-tune myself on the frame. I mean, we've seen a couple of frames maybe in the past on this channel where I had to get the sanding paper out to just make things fit. None of this was the case here. Things are actually quite well thought through, like the whole mount for the seat post, also the way how the battery, the Di2 battery, is integrated here. I also think that the way how the headset is designed with the spacer in the front, or with this kind of I call it stabilizer, I think, which is routing the hoses nicely and keeping them in place. It was a very straightforward and quite simple way of building this up. So yeah, I can't wait to get this out on the road and to report back how much different this is going to be, especially in comparison to the titanium, more high-end actually, even titanium bikes that I've been riding recently. So I hope that you enjoyed this little video. If you did, consider hitting that like button, consider subscribing if you're not subscribed, especially if you want to stay up to date in regards to this frame and what the review is going to look like. If you have any particular questions towards this frame or the build, or what I should be looking out for when test riding it, feel free to drop it down in the comments below. And with that, I'll say thanks a lot for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.